Welcome back to That Rugby Podcast. You're joined by myself, Luke Bowden, and my co-host, Hughesy, superstar in the making. Try assist, match winner on the weekend. We mentioned it in the last podcast, but you kicked us off on the weekend, and in this podcast, run us through that moment.
I was going to bring this up later. I didn't realize we're talking about this up front.
I've got to go straight into it.
It was like I said last week. You asked me what position do I play, and I said, and I quote, and I'm sure there's a recording of this. This is definitely what I said at the time: is that I don't play a position. I put myself in a position to make plays. That's word for word what I said. If you go back and listen to the other podcast, it's exactly what I said. No, it was just a case of right place, right time. I essentially, it was towards the end of the game. I knew something needed to happen, and so they were getting ready to get the ball out of the ruck. So I thought, well, I'm just going to rush this dickhead in front of me and try and lay him out. Instead, I completely whiffed him as he took one step to the side and stepped around me. But luckily, it was tactical, you see, because I knew I had a teammate backing me up who then clobbered him. And as he was getting ready to offload, I was then in position to intercept that offload. So as I said, I put myself in a position to make plays. So I grabbed the ball, about 50 meters out from the try line. This is the last minute of the game. We're down by 4 points. And so I just looked at all the open turf ahead of me, and I did what any good front rower does, and I kicked the ball. There's no way I'm running 50 meters. I'm not making that. Their props could have caught me, I was not making that. And our coach's philosophy is don't play the ball on your own half. So I thought, look, I'm not going to play the ball in my own half here. Something took hold of me. I think, as you said, the spirit of Luke Bowden took hold of me. I thought, what would Luke do? And I just kicked the ball. And luckily we had a very fast winger, Dan Mooney, shout out to the Moon Man, who chased the ball down, got there ahead of everyone else on the side of the Barker Old Boys, towed it ahead for his own nice little kick, and then regathered and scored a try that won the game on the buzzer. And look, I think calling it a miracle is probably not too far, because it's just about the best thing I've ever done on a rugby field. I've been a career front rower, a career bench front rower, you could even say. I'm of a particular size and build, and I have a particular set of skills, and those skills do not involve scoring points or kicking balls. And I was just in the right place at the right time. And after I kicked the ball and as I'm running it down the field, for the first 2 seconds, I was just like, Jesus, I hope this doesn't go badly. And then I saw Mooney coming through, and I saw that he was going to get the ball. And I'm like, holy shit, something might have happened here. And then for the last 3 seconds, as he's running through and goes and scores the try, I'm like, holy shit, we talked about this on the podcast. This is exactly what we said would happen on the podcast. And yeah, it was great. It helped accomplish what is known as a knob wash, because it's the Knox Old Boys to the Knobs, and it was a whitewash because we won all the games against the rival team, Barker Old Boys, on their Ladies' Day, mind you. The Colts had won, and if the seconds had lost, it would have really demoralized the first. So winning that really won the whole day for the Knox Old Boys, I'd like to say. But that's me done now for the year. I might lace the boots back up again next year for a game again. If the club calls me and they need me, they know where to find me.
Well, they'll be calling more often after your heroics at the end of the game, mate, surely. No, I mean, there's going to be a nice wee edit come out later this week. But, yeah, congratulations, Hughesy. We talked about it. You WWL, what would Luke do? And you did it. And look, now you're pretty much a superstar.
It is, yeah. Darren Coleman has been on the recruitment drive, I'll say that much. They're low on front rowers at the moment,
They are, and there's some whispers, and I like that. DC, couldn't find a better player. Could not find a better player.
He's a great recruiter, Darren Coleman. And, you dye my hair red, I could be a body double for Harry Johnson Holmes.
There it is. Yeah, I mean, he looks far and wide for the talent, doesn't he, DC? All the way to...
In my case, very far and very wide.
Subby's third grade
Yeah.
Division 2 of subbies fair grade.
Yeah.
Loved that. Well, shall we move on to the real rugby? Not saying that it wasn't real rugby, but
the professional rugby.
Professional rugby.
You know,
I mean,
where they're supposed to get paid, they don't get the cash under the table like we do.
Exactly. The Chiefs kicked us off. Beating the Highlanders, still undefeated, still looking on fire. Amoni Nawai is now looking like a bolter between him and Sean Stevenson of who's going to make the Rugby World Cup squads, because both of them have been in fine form for the Chiefs.
Yeah, Sean Stevenson he was everywhere in that game. But one thing I want to point out is that even though the Chiefs put 52 points on them, the Highlanders still scored 28 of their own. They're still plenty dangerous on their day as well. There's still, and we saw that last week against the Waratahs as well. There's enough there that is going to make for. It's not going to be a cakewalk if they make it into the finals. And they're in 10th position right now, but they could very easily sneak into that 8th position. I've said the Reds aren't making the finals. I think the Reds are going to miss out. So I think it's going to come down to the Rebels and the Highlanders who take that 8th spot, because I think we've said that the Waratahs and the Dura are going to make it into the finals. And so I think the Highlanders, and we might see a rematch against the Chiefs first week of the finals. And it would be, the Chiefs, they won that one, but there's probably some uncomfortable moments with the tries that the Highlanders scored in that one that probably made them a little bit wary and a little bit uncomfortable, I'll say.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And I think after this week, we'll definitely do a guide to make the finals next week on the podcast, where we look into who could actually make it between those final teams, because I think there a couple of eyes will open up. And with 3 weeks left to go after that, we'll see who's really got a good chance. But like I said, Reds don't beat New Zealand Super Rugby teams, and I think 3 of their last 4 games are against Super New Zealand.
They've got Chiefs. They've got Chiefs, and they've got the Blues, and then they've got the Highlanders, and they finish off against the Dura in Fiji. And if there's one thing we know, Luke, it's that you don't beat Fiji in Fiji.
We'll jump onto this game now, where the Dura beat the Hurricanes in Fiji. There must have been a full moon or something when the Blues beat Fiji in Fiji. Yeah. There must have been something. There was some god witch hoodoo going on.
No, you know what it was is that the Blues have got blue jerseys like the Dura do, and so there was just a miscommunication. They were just not sure. They thought it was training. They didn't realize it was an actual game.
Oh, so they just thought it was a training session, and that.
Thought it was a training session. Didn't realize it was an actual match. The Fijian spirits were not with the Dura on that day.
I heard some rumors as well that Joe Rokokoko actually sent some spirits across with the Blues. And that's how strong his power is for the Blues. That caused some issues as well. So there's some hoodoo there, but again, of Fiji looking very likely now to sneak into the finals in their second year in the comp, which is fantastic. Another fantastic
which is what someone on this podcast, maybe both of us, but what someone predicted at the start of the Super Rugby season.
Well, you flip-flop, because then Habosi was ruled out after.
I said I was less confident in it. It didn't mean I revoked the prediction.
I actually think in your top 8 you didn't have them in your actual our tabled predictions.
Look, that doesn't count.
So you may have done that as a prediction, but then not put it in your table predictions.
I did that purely as motivation for the Dura. Right? That wasn't a real prediction. That was a challenge. That was me putting it out there to them,
down the challenge like that,
throwing down the gauntlet, as it were.
I mean,
because I needed my prediction at the start of the year to come true, right? It needed it to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. I needed to speed these things along,
I don't think neither of us knew the power of Fiji, knew the spiritual power of Fiji to the Dura. Neither of us knew that.
There was a great quote from Artie Savia about what it's like playing in Fiji. He just said, oofed.
Yeah.
And he said some stuff after that, but just the start of it, just saying oofed is just that's usually the rugby players come up with some generic stuff like, oh, it's a fantastic crowd, it's a great atmosphere, whatever. But the fact you just let off with oofed is, it has to be something special to play there.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to start, bringing the same vibes of when you used to go and play the South African teams in South Africa. where it was like you get hit by a bit of altitude, or you get hit by that Fijian stickiness, then you get these, crazy South African fans, crazy Fijian fans. It's going to take on a world of its own. And this is my issue with the Moana Pacifica team, and what I said is that their identity should be the islands, and they should be playing not most of their home games there. It's just a silly idea to have it as a New Zealand-based team, in my opinion. I would be basing it out of Samoa and Tonga. But we digress on to the Crusaders bouncing back in a big way against the Force, with Will Jordan returning and playing 56 damn good minutes, making every New Zealander smile just that little bit more.
Yeah, I watched the highlights of this game. It was a good fight from the Western Force, but just clearly outclassed by the Crusaders. And the Force aren't, you can't write them off either. They could still stick at the finals. They had a good win over the Highlanders a few weeks back as well. So they're capable of beating the New Zealand teams, or at least the Highlanders. At least they're capable of sneaking into that top 8. So I would not write them off just yet. And they've got a home game against Fiji, which would be tough for Fiji to overcome. Home game against the Brumbies, so you got to travel to the West Coast there for the Brumbies, and then they're away at the Rebels and finish off with the Chiefs, right? So the Chiefs game, probably
we don't know yet, because
lost.
They may be resting players though.
Exactly. That's the one where we've highlighted they could be resting players, but the games against the Dura and the Rebels are definitely winnable for them, and on their day they could take it to the Brumbies. So I wouldn't write out the Western Force just yet.
Totally. I agree with that. The Blues then just about gave us the shock of the round, losing to Moana Pacifica. They were down, what was it?
Oh, my goodness.
30-24 as time was up on the clock. But penalty after penalty after penalty, before finally the referee had to give a penalty try, which, again, it was the right decision. It definitely wasn't. It sucks that the game ended like that. But when he awarded the penalty, I was like, well, yeah, they have given up 5 penalties on their line, and the scrum was going backwards, and you're like, I'm 90% sure a try would have been scored if they hadn't collapsed it, and it was just everything was adding up, and it was like he had to as terrible as it was to finish like that for Moana Pacifica. 2 yellow cards
also at that point as well for Moana Pacifica.
It was going to happen. So again, unfortunate, but it is what it is. Moana Pacifica at least showed some defense. Again, another one of those games, though, if you think about it, Moana Pacifica should realistically be one of the biggest, if not the biggest rival of the Blues. Both play in the same city. A massive 8,100 people turned up to the game or something like that. So a fucking miserable crowd at Eden Park, which holds about 55. So you had not even a fifth of the venue.
It was a great game as well.
Again, an really exciting game. So it's just not happening for Moana Pacifica at the moment and New Zealand rugby. But yeah, disappointing to say.
Yeah, I just want to highlight this. Once again, Moana Pacifica, Era Inare, the halfback, once again, really standing out to me as a really good halfback. Like I reckon he's just about as good, maybe better than most Australian halfbacks at the moment. Like, he was directing traffic everywhere in that game. He was making plays with his feet as well. He should be a highlight player for Moana Pacifica, and yeah, he's Caleb Clark's cousin as well. So it was a bit of cousin rivalry going on in that game.
Definitely. And then your Tars go up to Queensland, beat the Reds, did a fantastic job of doing it. Looked comfortable enough, we'll say. Yeah,
the final scoreline is probably a little bit closer than what it was. Like, the phases of the game sort of play out true. Like 17-0 at halftime was relatively close to that point. And then if you go up to everything bar the final buzzer, the scoreline's pretty reflective of how the game went from there. The Waratahs had control of it. I think they just gave up the try at the end because it really had no implications. It only had a point differential implication, no bonus points, so no ladder points, and you want to escape there without any injury. But one thing I want to point out is Stan Sport put out their predictor of the game. And I'm not sure if this was based on voting. I'm not sure if this is based on Stan Sport's own statistic. It was voting. 76% predicted the Reds to win, right? So I just want to say to all 76% of you, that, you know? Like,
Do you want to
get
hear
around it. You obviously have not been watching the Waratahs this season if you think there's a 76% chance they're going to lose.
I'll double
that
down
game.
on that. The Hurricanes had a 95% voting chance to win. Now, obviously, it's a bit different, but
Yeah.
95%. Again, 76% of people don't know that the Reds aren't very good this year. But people seem to still
95% of people don't know that you can't beat Fiji in Fiji unless you've got a blue jersey.
Unless you've got a blue jersey. So that knocks out a whole lot of teams. Like
It does. Crusaders, gone.
Lost. That's why they lost.
We saw it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the final game of the round was the Brumbies that held off the Melbourne Rebels late charge in the battle of the number 10s, Lolasio versus Carter Gordon. Lolasio gets the upper hand, but has the better team in front of him, so I really don't fucking.
I think Carter Gordon arguably played better. From what I saw, Lolasio got some points, but that was really off support play, which is nice, and you should be doing that. But as a 10, I feel like you should be creating the plays for someone else to be the support player. Like, it's not your primary role. Like, I would have loved to see more highlights of him creating plays. I think I saw Carter Gordon do that a little bit more.
One kick set up for a try, and you think you can tell number 10s in Australia what they can do, bud. Look at you. Look at you.
Look, Eddie's been on the horn. He just needs someone to come into training camp and just sort of give a bit of a tutorial, you know, coaching role. Well, I told him I'm not retired fully from my playing days yet. I'm not ready to step into the coaching sphere, but, you know, come the 2027 World Cup, hit me up then.
You'll be on there. Nice. All right.
Yeah.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Talking about a couple of key Wallabies.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I was going to just actually say from this game, from the Brumbies game and from the Waratahs game, speaking of Wallabies players, I'm glad you sort of brought this up, because I wanted to talk about one of the positions that has really been a sore point for Wallabies in past years, which is the second row position. And I think Jed Holloway is really standing up this year as an amazing lock. I think Nick Frost is doing a great job as well.
Yeah, I rate both of those players. I think the only issue with Jed Holloway is his height, because he's only 6'1", I believe, which isn't, like, again, his position. This is why I think Dave Rennie was favouring him at 6, because he's a tall 6, and he's got the skills of a 6, but he's not a giraffe like we saw with Nick Frost, who needs to gallop as he runs because he can't actually run properly. So, yeah, I don't know. Again, all the skill in the world, Jed Holloway showed it, and he's shown it again this season. But it'll be interesting what Eddie Jones makes of that positional decision when you're facing some of those bigger teams, the South Africas and stuff, where they play him. It's the same with the All Blacks with Scott Barrett. Scott Barrett's not the tallest bloke in the world, so they love to put Sam Whitelock and Brodie Retallick together and then put Barrett at 6. So it'll be interesting how Eddie Jones is thinking about it all.
Yeah, definitely.
But Nick White and James O'Connor could be heading to the Force in what has been is a massive coup for them, which would be a massive coup. I think Nick White, more importantly, and then they've obviously been missing I guess a number 10 throughout the season. They've tried many. I don't know what's happened to the young buck Reece-Jan Pasiatoa. I assume an injury.
It's got a knee injury that's like pretty keeping him out quite a while. Yeah,
that all I could assume, because I haven't seen him on the field, but I know Bryce Hegarty started a couple of games. Hamish Stewart started off there. So they could get, at least a 2-3 years deal with O'Connor and White to run your 9 and 10. Isn't a bad shout at all, because if that team can get some direction, they can be very dangerous.
Yes, absolutely. I think there's two really experienced players. If you sort of do a rotational thing like what the Brumbies have been doing very methodically this year with their 9 and 10, it could be very dangerous for the Western Force if Reece-Jan Pasitoa does come back healthy.
Totally. Cooper's back. Quade Cooper actually fully made his rugby return in Japan, which is has to be good news for every Australian watching, even if not that he's not playing in Aussie, but just playing footy in general is big for the Wallabies to be able to see how quickly he can get up to game speed, how quickly he can get involved and up to the level, if he comes back at the level as he was. I don't have any doubts about his fitness levels, because he's kept himself in fantastic shape the past few years. I think the biggest one will be how his game IQ and his feeling for the game comes back. And Quade's always been a natural feeler of the game, if you know what I mean. So it'll be interesting to see, hopefully, a good quick return for him.
Yes.
Now, taking us over to the other side of the world, where Chris Ashton made his potential final appearance in the Premiership for the Leicester Tigers and got red carded. And could be potentially his last ever game. I think 101 total tries in the Premiership, most tries, greatest ever try scorer, they're calling him, in the Premiership. So it had me thinking, what are some of the worst ways to finish a career? If you were to go out, you know, your last game of your career, and, you know, what would, obviously you, say you retired after your game, that would have been one of the better ways to go out. A setup of a try. But what's some of the worst ways? And I was thinking about it, and I'd go, surely being part of that 2015 English World Cup team where they got knocked out at home and the pools didn't even make it out of the pools. Because I was thinking, you know, making it to a Rugby World Cup final and losing would suck, but you've actually made it to the pinnacle of your sport and your last game ever. You know, you've probably done quite a lot in sport before that. Obviously not winning would be, but I think actually what would be worse is to like lose in a final pool game in a home World Cup, to be knocked out when you're expected to go further.
Yeah, I think something like that would be bad, but even I think like you can add onto the misery a little bit there. I think if you're playing a game that makes history, but in a bad way for your team. So I'm talking about like the South African loss to Japan or the Irish loss to Japan, right? But make it even worse, right? Say you're injured and pretty severe injury in like the first 5 minutes, like you tear your ACL the first 5 minutes, right? And you'll be forever torturing yourself in your mind of, maybe if I hadn't done my ACL, we wouldn't have lost that game. Maybe I let everyone down by getting injured.
I think what would be worse is 2 yellow cards for like very minimal things. So like, let's say and it happened not so long ago with Drew Mitchell. Like, say you get a yellow card for a deliberate knockdown when you're just reaching for an intercept early in the first half, ref gives you a yellow card. Then towards the end of the game, you get yellow carded for repeated infringements from the whole team who got a warning, but you're the one who get yellow carded. So you get a red card and it like costs your team the game, and then you get knocked out in that World Cup stage.
That'd be pretty bad.
That would be, or even like a chance to win the Bledisloe. Say the Wallabies have won one game.
You know, if that Bernard Foley game was his last game, that would be a pretty bad way to go.
Exactly. Like, to go out like that, to say Bernard Foley had 35, it was his, you know, ending game. They were, and say that was the second game and you'd won in New Zealand or whatever. So all you had to do was kick the ball out, and that happened. You would forever, rather than an injury, you'd just be sitting there thinking, like, it cost us the Bledisloe Cup. Like, how it'd be tough. I'm just thinking that has to be, obviously Chris Ashton had a great career, but I was just thinking the worst ways to go out would just be something like that. Just something.
Be terrible.
Niggly like that. Yeah. That was a good pick up, the Foley one. I like that. Getting on to women's rugby, and starting with the Super W, back-to-back champs for Fiji Anadura, took out the Reds. I believe they were up pretty heavily at one stage in the first half, and the Reds slowly brought them back in. But yeah, congratulations again to the Fiji Anadura taking it out back-to-back.
Yeah, incredible. They didn't look so great during the season, but they turned into a different team finals time. The same with the comeback against the Waratahs last week. Just incredible stuff from Fiji Anadura, and shows that Fiji is cooking up something special with their Super Rugby team, both men's and women's teams.
Yes, totally. They've got a great structure there, and it shows this shows that this is the identity I talked about. No Moana Pacifica women's team. There's nothing there to grab hold of and go, yes, that's the culture, that's the team, that's what they're playing for. Whereas it's a bit different with the Dura. Now, I want to touch space quickly on the new competition that's been named WXV, the Women's XV. It's going to be a cross-pool competition consisting of the top 3 teams from both the Six Nations and Pacific 4 series. They will be divided into 2 pools consisting of teams from the same competition, but will only play opposition in their other pool. So then it says from 2026, the bottom ranked side will be relegated to WXV2. England, France, and Wales qualify for the inaugural WXV Season 1 by finishing the top 3 in the Six Nations. So there's going to be like 3 divisions to this. I believe it's been played out of New Zealand, the first one. And it's basically just another competition for women's rugby. And I think it's a great idea, especially international rugby, to get the game going. A lot of talk around, does it diminish, the Women's Rugby World Cup, which I don't. I think this is going to be a very interesting sticking point for how could the men's do another competition between every 2 years, something similar to this. Because, if it goes really well, which I think it will, the way women's rugby is growing at the moment and still, going in that linear growth, this is, I think, a huge take and a great advantage for World Rugby to be doing.
Absolutely. Like anything that gets, look, women's rugby is the growth area right now. I say all of women's sport is a huge growth market for everyone right now. Anyone that doesn't recognize that is, frankly, you got your head in the sand, right? To just look at the numbers of how women's sport can do. Even if they never match the same tier, same level of attendances or same level of support as men's tier 1 competitions, even if they're only something like a tier 2 competition, like that is still great revenue to be brought in. And that's even a pessimistic look on it. The optimum look is that they can match the men's sport for fans, because more and more women are becoming interested in sport. More and more women are becoming interested in playing sport and supporting and watching sport. And there's a lot of sports fans out there, myself and my co-host included, who just like watching sports and will watch anything. So there's a market there for it, and to see more efforts being made is always a good thing.
Totally. And I think, with the right marketing and the right vision around this competition, I think could be an awesome setup. A couple final points. The World XV versus the Barbarians is coming up. I believe it's not too far away, actually. Let me bring up. It is 20 days away, so 3 weeks away now. The big news is Izzy Folau playing for the World XV. So I believe it's Steve Hansen against Eddie Jones. Eddie Jones coaching the Barbarians, Steve Hansen coaching the World XV.
Yes.
World XV already includes Charles Peatel, Nami Lamape, Nick Phipps, Marika Korobeti, Semi Rarada, Lorenzo Canone, Reece Patchell, Adam Hastings, and a couple others, and then obviously Israel Folau named as well, it'll be a very interesting game of 2 all-star teams going at it. Fascinating watch. The big one that everyone's highlighting, though, is Joe Marler, obviously England rugby, very well outspoken. Again, especially with Izzy Folau, has rubbed the knife in to Izzy's views a couple of times, is playing for the Barbarians, whereas Izzy playing for the World XV. Will be an interesting time that those two clash, what goes down. But I'm excited for international rugby again.
Absolutely, and a game like this will be very entertaining. Some other players of the Barbarians, Danny Kerr, Dan Cole, Johnny May, Jack Noel, and Sam Simmons are confirmed. Alan Wynne-Jones is expected to join the side as well.
Oh, excellent! Yeah. It could be a bit of an all-star cast going on here with 2 great coaches. I imagine we'll see some really enterprising rugby. So, will be a very cool watch to kick us off into, I guess, the international window and then the Rugby World Cup eventually.
Yes.
It'll all go around pretty quickly. Now, last point today I'm going to discuss with you because I read an article on Wayne Smith, the great Wayne Smith, New Zealand rugby coach, coached the Black Ferns to a victory at the home Rugby World Cup. Said when he was watching the Force versus the Highlanders, it must have been a few weeks ago now, he actually turned it off at half-time because of how many, there's already been 2 cards. He said that half the time the referee stuck his arm out, and advantage was Nick Berry, the referee. And it wasn't a blight at Nick Berry, it was just the way the game was going. And he actually watched the animal documentary, which he said he's never done in his life before. And then I said, well, I challenge you to try and stick through the Hurricanes games every season, and then you'll be definitely switching some games off to animal documentaries at halftime because of how they play. I'm sure you're the same as a Tars fan, my friend. So he said that he's worried at the state of the game, and then a couple of Jeff Wilson, I know, has backed him up, and John Kerwin, just the state of the game and how there's so many advantages. The ref has to give away a penalty. And we watched probably actually my favourite game I've watched in so long, the Brumbies versus the Hurricanes, where, like we kept saying, I think there was about 10 penalties maybe all game, 8 penalties all game, about 5 scrums all game. It was a fantastic game. Only about 2 of those in the first half as well. So it was a really good watch. Now, one interesting take was no hands in the ruck, and we killed the pilfer. Now, and so you can still turn over the ball in the ruck. It just means the only person who can handle the ball in the ruck is a halfback going in to get it out. Everyone else just cleans over and cleans out. And when I first read this, I was like, that's disgusting. How dare you take away from Richie McCaw? How dare you take away from Pocock? The hoopers of this world. Artie Savia, who make their livings poaching ball. The Connor Hugheses, your brother,
I was waiting for that one.
who sits there and counts throughout a game. Throughout a game, we're talking about a game in the middle of a game. We'll count how many pilfers he has. How can you take that away? But then I got to thinking about it, and I said, it actually is actually quite smart because, all right, we now no longer get any holding on because a player, even if they, it's no real reason to hold on because no one's going for the ball, you just place it. Your only penalties at a ruck are when coming off your feet or coming from the side. An actual counter ruck is a counter ruck. It's not just someone getting their hands on the ball first. It actually makes a lot of sense. To me, I would love to see this trialled in a decent tournament and see how it impacted the game. I imagine would get faster. I imagine when you're on defense, you'd have to defend. You couldn't just expect the greats of your Artie Savias, your hoopers to steal the ball. I actually started to bring myself around to the idea that there would be less penalties and would get a better game. I just wanted to get your thoughts on it.
I worry then that the game could become too predictable because there is a lot that still favours the attacking side at the moment, particularly when you're defending, from your 22 to your try line, right? One of the only ways to sort of kill an attacking drive there is for someone to get a steal, right? Or for the other team to make a mistake. Causing a penalty by getting your hands on the ball and getting a pilfer there can be such a game-changing play and game-saving play, in fact. And that's what I worry about. It's just that when teams get within the 22, it becomes a lot easier for them to get through the defense. That's my main concern, is that it takes away another part of defending when we're already making the game more attack oriented. Now, that's not me 100% torpedoing the idea. I guess that's not me being 100% fully against it. I think there is some merits to it. I just think it needs to be very carefully weighed up. And I'd like to see it trialed and see how that affects those kind of situations.
Yeah, that's a good situation to put yourself in as that to the goal line. But what I would imagine is a coach would actually benefit from a bit of strategy around that about how do we actually stop them from the 22 now. We can't bank on that. We've got to counteract a ball, or we've got to have our defense on point. I think it was one of those ideas where someone said, we've got too many rules, and we do. We just have too many rules, I think. And how can we strip away some of those rules that's not going to hurt the integrity of our game, but allow us to improve the game? And I just thought that one would be really interesting. And what I might start doing every podcast is bring a rule I think we could strip away and how it would work. And I just think this was a really good one first up, because it is such a talk. Think about how many penalties given away other than offsides. I imagine it would be not releasing and hands in the ruck would be the two biggest penalties that you give away.
Absolutely.
So if you can kill those ones out, you win the get. You're winning half the battle. So I like the idea of it, but I like your counter out point. How do you? That is one of the we've mentioned the Bernard Foley moment on this podcast. That only came because of Fekete getting a steal in the dying minutes over the ball to win the penalty. So you take that moment away. Interesting thoughts. If you have any thoughts for our listeners out there, please let us know. You can message us on our Instagram and everything like that as well. Other than that, we're down to 4 more weeks in Super Rugby. It's getting down to crunch time. Top 5 still look like top 5, but from everywhere else perspective, there's definitely opportunities to make finals. But Chiefs obviously going in as big favourites to the finals here. The URC had their quarterfinals and now going to semi-finals. I believe it is Leinster versus Munster. One semi-final, and Stormers versus Bulls in the other semi-final.
It is, yes, the Stormers versus Connacht and Leinster versus Munster.
Connacht. So yeah, that was the big thing. The Sharks or Bulls, one of the South African teams miss out on championship rugby next year because...
Yeah, so Leinster beat the Sharks and the Stormers beat the Bulls.
And I think because... Munster who bet Ulster?
Connacht.
Because Connacht bet Ulster. Ulster finished higher than Sharks on the table, so they don't get an automatic spot through to the Champions Cup. So the Sharks will be playing in the, whatever it is, the second division comp. So, yeah, that's there. And then I think the Premiership is starting to get into their semi-finals and finals. So, yeah, hopefully we'll see some good footy out of the European-based teams as well.
Definitely. Always want to see good footy.
We love some footy. We love the footy. Anything else on your list, mate? I think that was it for today.
That's it. That's it for me.
That's it. Well, honestly, Superstar, leave us with your thoughts on your try. Just your final words to all the adoring fans out there. What do you have to say? And the internet cut out. So I'm going to leave you with this. When you get a rugby ball in any rugby, anytime you're playing rugby, when you catch the ball, just think, what would Luke do? And when you think that, you'll end up like Hughesy, my co-host here, and you will do some great things. But other than that, thank you for joining us. We've been the Sports Booth, and this has been That Rugby Podcast. We will see you next time. Goodbye. Peace.